guys, Caleb here, and we are back with some more Red Knot. So today we are going to be reading a story called Sins of Deception by Valerie Wilcox, author of Sins of Betrayal. I see we have a theme going here. This happens to be a paperback novel, apparently, that my mother got from the Dollar General. There's a blurb on the front. I can't read it because of the Dollar General sticker. Thank you, Dollar General. The back of the book says, "The first book in this delightful series was praised as distinctive and intriguing. Publishers Weekly. In Sins of Deception, sailing instructor Kelly Montgomery once again finds herself swimming in a sea of mystery and murder, ellipses. Kelly is thrilled when her friends Paul and Sharon Crenshaw sign up for a trip with her brand new charter business. But the voyage is not the cheerful reunion Kelly had hoped for. There is tension in the air as they sail toward home, and the trip ends on a decidedly sour note when Paul is arrested for murder. Paul is the last person Kelly would suspect of committing a crime, but a prostitute was found dead on a yacht registered in his name. And although he claims he's been framed, the incriminating evidence is hard to ignore. Soon Kelly realizes that there's a lot she doesn't know about Paul and his family, and that this is one case she won't be able to sail through. Her, 'cause we're clever, ellipses. And earthly, likable heroine. With ellipses, like we have to think about, is she a girl or is she not? Ireland Flower. Then in big bold red letters, Sins of Deception. Open the paperback. Don't miss the other sailing mysteries, Sins of Betrayal and Sins of Silence. Praise for Valerie Wilcox's previous sailing mysteries. Kelly Montgomery is a welcome addition to the roster of female sleuths. You will like her brain and her heart and her tongue. This sounds like cannibalism to me. Which is as salty as the sound on which she sails her sloop. What? Which is as salty as the sound on which she sails her sloop. Any yacht sailing enthusiasts want to explain this to me? An impressive debut. Ellipses. I look forward to seeing Kelly again, and again, and again, and again. Yes, such a ways with words. Stephen Greenleaf, author of Flesh Wounds. Wilcox does a good job of bringing depth and resonance to Kelly and her unusual life. Publishers Weekly. Anyone who likes a good, thrilling mystery will enjoy this book, and anyone who also loves sailing will enjoy it even more. The female protagonist is a fiery, intelligent, down-to-earth sailor with a good heart, ellipses. The descriptions of sailing are right on the money, ellipses. A fast-moving, entertaining book sailors will enjoy. The Journal of American Sailing Association. Wilcox's debut sails smoothly through a sea of dark secrets and murky death. The puns, they offend my eyes. Mary Dime, author of Legs Benedict. Why does that sound like a porn novel? With her meaningful plot and earthy, likable sailing instructor heroine, Wilcox treats us to an adventure that resonates long after we finish reading. Ireland Flower, author of Seven Sisters. Valerie Wilcox shows much talent and clearly a love of sailing, the sea, and Seattle. Ellipses. The storyline is as crisp as a chilling morning out at sea, and the subplots add several leagues of depth. A fabulous sea cruise. Ha ha ha. Oh, we are so clever and punny. Midwest Book Review. And then we have more from Berkeley Publishing, some other stuff. I tell you what, if this is disappointing, I'm going to whip out my Savannah Ride and show you some real good female mystery novels right there. Some more stuff. When was this book When did this book come out? Oh, 2000? Okay, copyright 2000. Dedication page. Acknowledgements. Ellipses. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Ellipses. From The Stolen Child by W.B. Yeats, 1886. How much you want to bet this has nothing to do with what we're about to read? Title page for name dropping. Here we go. Chapter 1. On the water, everything is true. It is only when you've been on the water, sailed its moods, breathed its secrets, and experienced its power that the saline scent of truth will manifest itself. The saline truth? So, I have to experience salt water to know truth? I'm pretty sure that's wrong. And once you've felt its pure, exciting touch, you cannot return to the shore unchanged. The manner of its arrival, as a fine mist gently nudging at the edge of your consciousness, or as a violent tidal wave crashing at your soul, matters not. What matters is the remembering. It is the remembering that allows you to discard all the false and pretentious trappings of your life. It is the remembering that gives you the power to rise above the desperate everyday struggle and seize the life you crave. A life that is real. A life that is authentic. A life that is yours. You know, for an opening paragraph, I'm going to say that's okay. Certainly doesn't turn me off. I guess I'm not really one for overly describing things, but that's a fine starting paragraph so far, so let's keep going. You want to succeed in life, Kelly darling? Then get out on the water. Find the wind and hoist your sails. Listen to the screeching gulls, the luffing sails, the rushing water. Taste the salt spray on your tongue. Feel your hair whipping against your face, and breathe in the clean, pure sea air that carries the one true life you seek. And remember. You know, if we were suddenly in One Piece, I think this would be appropriate. Strange space for some reason. I don't know why there should be a gap there, but we should just get right into it, but whatever. Paul Crenshaw was one of the good guys, and if you suggested otherwise, I'd be the first to call you a fool. Oh, fantastic, this is first person. In case this might be the first video that goes up in which I deal with first person narrative, I tend not to like first person narrative because I can't separate a character from myself in first person. I hear a noise downstairs. I grab a flashlight and go investigate. No. I hear a noise downstairs. I, myself, grab the flashlight and get the fuck out of there and go call the police. Anyway, back to the story. I suppose you'd be right in claiming that I had a favorable bias towards the man because of our long friendship. But if you talk to anyone who knew him, you'd get the same reaction. Paul was a loyal friend, loving husband and father, and a successful engineer who went out of his way to help those in need. I admit that you never really... I'm sorry, Kitty. That you never really know a person, but in Paul Crenshaw's case, the private persona matched the public persona to a T. So when he was handcuffed and hauled off to jail at gunpoint, I was more than a little shocked, not to mention pissed. Even before his untimely arrest, my first trip as a skipper of a chartered sailboat hadn't been what I would call fun and games. But I'd sort of expected a few bumps. After all, it was a new adventure for me. What I didn't expect was to have my business, and ultimately my life, nearly destroyed. So this entire book is going to be a flashback sequence. This is a story that you're telling me of a story of something that happened. I would say this is Inception, but I'm not even gonna go there. No, a dream within a dream within a dream. I'm sorry, kitty. Meow. At first, everything was just peachy. My clients and I had left Seattle on a balmy September morning a little over a week ago. The four of us were aboard a borrowed 40-foot sloop called Picture Perfect, which at the time seemed aptly named, given the weather and company. So a sloop is a kind of boat, I guess, or something. Our destination was okay, so if I have to guess what you're talking about, you're doing it wrong. Even if you know all about stuff, like this person apparently knows all about boats and going to sea or traveling in the ocean or whatever, that's fine. But for dumb people like me, who don't know anything about boats, it's not going to hurt you to put a comma in there, explain what kind of boat that is, and then get back to what you're talking about. So, where was I here? A 40-foot sloop. What's a sloop? Explain that to me, because not everybody reading your book knows what a sloop is. Come on. Just a little comma there. Tell me what that is, end comma, and go back to what you're telling me. Yeah, I agree, JC. Our destination was the San Juan Islands, a cluster of emerald jewels tucked away in the northwest corner of Washington State. The trip was a reunion of sorts. Paul and Sharon Crenshaw had been my next-door neighbors for almost 15 years, but after my husband's death, I sold our family home and moved aboard my sailboat at Larstad's Marina. We stayed in touch for a while, but as often happens, we drifted apart in the last couple of years. I felt more than a little guilty about the break since I was their 14-year-old daughter, Tiffany's godmother. I'd been thinking about re-establishing contact with the Crenshaws for some time, especially since my own daughter had essentially left the nest. Cassie, oh, I'm in this book! Fantastic! This is going to be weird talking about me in third person. Cassie attended college in New York, and her visits home were all too infrequent. So when Paul and his wife signed up for my first chartered trip, I was delighted. The only disappointment was that Tiffany couldn't join us, but as Paul explained, she just started a new school year. The trip was also a celebration. I love how we're not actually had interaction. It's just the setup. Like, we haven't actually talked to any of these people. We're just being like, so this is what's up, Honestly, I would rather, instead of you telling me all this, I'd rather you show me this. Like, let's start with, you explain that you're doing this little thingy where you're, whatever you are, for this, boat thing, that whatever it actually is. And, and then these people show up and you're like, oh, I haven't seen you in years, and we really should have talked more, and it's a shame we didn't, and hey, why don't you come hang out with me, and we'll have a week-long holiday. What about your daughter? Oh, she's at school, and so she can't come with us, but that's okay, she's old enough to, be home alone for like a week, and we trust her and stuff. And then go right into your story. I don't really this is okay. To set up a story, this is okay. It's just not what I would prefer to do. And I really don't recommend you start a story like this. But so far, this is okay. The trip was also a celebration. Paul's engineering firm had just been awarded a major contract with Larstad's Marina. Yeah, the marina's status as Seattle premier boating facility had been in jeopardy ever since Coho Marina had opened for business 6 months previously. Lordstad's had already lost several longtime clients to the ritzy new facility, and more were threatening to leave as soon as a slip became available. In an effort to prevent further bailouts, Old Man Lordstad had decided to enlarge and update his namesake marina. The expansion project, while welcomed in many quarters, wasn't without opposition. Many feared that their mortgage rates would be raised, while others were concerned that the additional slips would have an adverse impact on the environment and place an unmanageable burden on the various amenities at the marina. I hadn't taken a position I hadn't taken a position on the issue except to recommend Paul's firm, Pierpoint Engineering and Construction. Really, Pierpoint. You don't have to pun everything. You don't have to reference everything. Just because your story involves, sailing ships and crap in the background, it doesn't mean everything in your story has to reference that. You don't have to be punny. You don't have to be ironic. Just tell me a story. And make it a good story. Engineering and construction for the job. Although I doubted that my recommendation carried much weight with the old man, Lordstad, Paul was very grateful for my help. I think the charter trip was his way of thanking me. Martin Porowski, Paul's best friend and construction supervisor at his firm, had also signed up for the charter. I didn't know Martin that well, but I was immediately drawn to his quirky sense of humor and easygoing manner. Although somewhat preoccupied, Paul was in a good mood when we first got underway. So too were Shannon and Martin. The downturn in everyone's spirits began the minute Jason Porowski, Martin's 17-year-old son, stepped aboard the boat. Again! Show me! Don't tell me all this! I would like to see all this happening, not just be told what's going on. What sense is it writing a story if you're just going to tell me this, in passing? Remember, guys, write in active voice, not passive voice. Don't tell me a story about something happened. Show me a story that happened. Because of some conflict with his schedule, he joined us after we left Seattle. We picked him up at the public boat dock in La Conner, a picturesque little town in the middle of tulip country. As we cruised through the Swishaman Canal toward our first night's anchorage, I tried to figure out what the problem was. I'd never met him before this trip, but Jason seemed like a nice kid. A little moody, perhaps, but not surly or foul-mouthed like some of the teens I'd had in my classes when I taught high school. Well, that's nice to know about your background, I guess. Haven't really been told anything else, honestly. At 6'5", he towered over his father, but they shared the same breathtaking good looks, deeply tanned despite their fair skin. They both had sandy blonde hair, green eyes, and a body that screamed, "Look at me! I'm a jock!" Usually when you refer to somebody as a jock, that's a negative. You could just say he's very athletic. There's nothing wrong with that. But Jason played down his athletic prowess, clearly embarrassed by his father's endless recitation of his own glory days on the gridiron. Well, then his dad's kind of a dick. Martin didn't pay much attention to his son, but Paul and Sharon acted as if the kid was some kind of pariah. They avoided him as much as is physically possible on a 40-foot sailboat. For the life of me, I couldn't understand why he made everyone so uncomfortable. I found him polite, eager to help with chores, and pretty good sailor. If Jason had done something to offend the Crenshaws, why invite him along? As the week wore on, the kid's persistence presence cast such a pall. Such a pall? Really? Such a pall? I've never heard of that. I would say cast a shadow, but whatever. Such a pall over the group that even the pristine beauty of San Juan Islands and excellent sailing conditions failed to excite anyone, including me. So, you're not bothered asking the grown-ups what's wrong with them, that the kid seems pretty okay, so what's their problem? Second of all, you bring up a good point as to if they didn't like him, why did they bring him along? Why did they say, hey, yeah, it's okay if you come too? Like, this just seems like the excuse to say somebody is giving you negative vibes, and he's a bad guy, even though he seems pretty nice. I don't know, maybe we're creating a scapegoat character, or maybe we're being a little too obvious of who we're trying to make the villain of our murder mystery story. Gee, I wonder what we could be trying to do, but hopefully we are not being that obvious. I wish I'd never come, Jason muttered as we sat side by side at the helm. We were alone in the cockpit, having just raised the sails after exiting the Port Sydney Marina in British Columbia, Canada. We'd spent the previous day on Vancouver Island, and were now en route to U.S. waters. In the distance, a green and white ferry navigated Harrow Strait, the broad watery expanse that links the San Juan Islands with their neighbor to the north. As had become their practice, the rest of the group had found other things to... So we're not... Dude, what... Who cares? Who cares? Shouldn't... The dude just said something and you're ignoring him to talk about the water. Dude, that is fucking rude. That makes you an asshole. As had become their practice, the rest of the group had found other things to do, and chewing wasn't it. For the past couple of days, Paul had been hiding out in the cabin with his briefcase and a stack of paperwork, while Sharon and Martin staked out separate territory for themselves on the forward deck. At the moment, Sharon had her nose buried in a romance novel, glorious, and Martin had stretched out on the bow to catch some rays. Although seemingly content when engaged in their own activities, there was no mistaking the tension that marked whatever personal interactions took place. Basically, no one was a happy camper. For no reason. We are not given any form of reason, which I guess is what's supposed to allude to the mystery. But we haven't had anything to set up a mystery. We've just been told what's going to happen in passive action. This is not how you tell a good mystery. This hasn't set up anything. Honestly, what this has done so far is how I feel about it. Like, pass this up. Like, so far, my recommendation of pass it up, it's not bad writing, it's just passive storytelling. And there's really no build-up to really warrant you getting into this story. That could change, because I'm still in the first chapter on page 5, but this is really, Why did you come? I asked Jason, finally. He glanced at Martin and shrugged. Don't ask me, it was my dad's idea. You could have said no. I tried to think of something positive to say, but at that point I was pretty much wishing I was somewhere else myself. I usually manage the sailing school at Lord Stan's Marina. You've already said all this crap, but I'd been trying to get a charter service going for a long time. It wasn't until my best friend Rose Randall was chosen as the marina's new general manager that old man Lardstead finally conceded that the idea had merit, especially since he didn't have to put out any cash for a new boat. A friend I helped through a difficult time a while back volunteered her sloop free of charge for the inaugural charter. Again, what is a sloop? You haven't told me yet. I'd been thrilled by the prospect of spending an entire week sailing in the Songwans with my friends, and hoped that the trip would be the beginning of a profitable side business for Sound Sailing School. Sound Sailing School. You couldn't have thought a better name. You couldn't have thought of a better name. Now all I hope to do is get back to Seattle without tossing someone overboard. Because we really haven't established anything that would warrant this kind of tension. And you couldn't say the same thing to the kid that I just said. You could have just said no. Why did you feel you have to do what your dad said? Then suddenly everything changed when the killers arrived. The killers? You mean like killer whales? Don't just say killers. What in the crap? Jason spotted the first one. Oh man, look at that! He pointed to an area some 100 yards off the starboard bow. My eyes traced the line from his finger to a spot where a huge black and white killer whales. Don't just say killers. Say killer whales. Or say orcas. No, you are not very good at explaining what things are. You just assume we're supposed to know. That's not very good for a writer. Black and white orca exploded out of the water. Like an ungainly ballerina, the beaching whale returned to the sea with a resounding splash. The noise so startled Martin that he jumped to his feet. What the hell was that? Another whale, smaller than the first, performed a similar maneuver. When its tail slapped the water, Sharon threw down her book. Oh my god, did you see that? What was that? You guys don't know what the fucking orca is? These guys don't know what orcas are. They've never watched Animal Planet. They've never seen TV at all. Or books. Or been to an aquarium. Well, orcas wouldn't be in an aquarium. They'd be at something like SeaWorld. But, like, seriously. Really. What is wrong here? These people are stupid. I slowed the boat by turning into the wind. Orcas, I said, a mother and her calf. Killer whales, Jason shouted. When the third and fourth whale popped out of the water, Sharon screamed, Kelly, get us out of here. They're orcas. They're not going to kill you. They're just killer whales. They eat whales. I turned the wheel and adjusted the sails so that we traveled parallel and slightly to the rear of the whales at the same speed as the calf, the slowest member of the pod. What are you doing? Martin shouted, trying not to separate the mother and her calf. Jason grabbed the binoculars. This is way cool. Is everything all right? Paul asked as he scrambled out of the cabin. I thought I heard someone scream. He carried a sheaf of papers in one hand. Sheaf? S-H-E-A-F. That's probably a correct usage of that word, but I've never heard that. I've always used a stack or something, but that's probably okay. But I doubted he'd been working while he was down below. His khaki shorts and tank top were wrinkled, and his thick curly brown hair was matted on one side as if he'd been napping. Well, I don't blame him. I nap out, I'm in the middle of the ocean and it's kind of nice out, and I take a nap too. I probably wouldn't be downstairs in a cabin asleep. Jason grinned and handed him the binoculars. We're surrounded by killers, man. Killer whales. Killer whales. Actually, I said, they're Orcus orca, the largest member of the dolphin family. Yes, thank you for filling us in, because they are too stupid to actually know what orcas are. This is the only thing you actually explain. You don't talk about what the hell a shoe or whatever the fuck it was is. You don't tell us anything, but you figure we are pretty so dumb that we don't know what an orca is. Priorities are in the wrong place. As Sharon and Martin joined us in the cockpit, Sharon propped her Versace sunglasses on her head and looked at me quizzically. Dolphins? Paul adjusted the focus on the binoculars and peered through the lenses. Although a little round-shouldered and not as strikingly good-looking as his friend Martin, Paul Crenshaw was still capable of making women run into walls. Because the only men we know are the ones that are hot. We don't know any ugly guys. Again, I'm pretty much going to whip out my Savannah Ride book, which is a lot better story than this so far, and doesn't make you feel stupid when you're reading it. Or maybe that's just because it's about a Southern belle doing Southern stuff, and I am Southern. I'll have to think about which one I should start with when it comes to Savannah Ride, but anyway. He was 35 and tall, with wiry body that, despite a few extra pounds around the belly, looked fit and youthful. Because he does. Just because. He turned to his wife and said, "Whales are a relative of the dolphin, honey." Orcas eat whales. That's why they're called killer whales. Whales are a relative of the dolphin, honey. Dolphins, porpoises, whales, they all belong in the same order as marine mammals. He handed her the binoculars. "Here, take a look. They're beautiful." She hesitated. "Aren't whales dangerous?" "They're not whales! They eat whales!" Aren't whales dangerous?" "Not if we don't do anything to aggravate them," I said. "We're positioned far enough away from the pod that it shouldn't be a problem." "Whales are so awesome." "They're not whales," Jason said. "We studied them in school, "Then you would know that they're not whales." Mr. Cohen told us about these two orcas in Antarctica that actually tipped an ice float up, dumping a sleeping seal right into the jaws of a third whale. Martin laughed. "Talk about your team players." Really? Nah, that's not funny. Your pun is not appreciated." "You got that right," Paul said. "This just sounds like I'm watching some dumb PSA. This is what it feels like I'm reading, a PSA. Strength and cooperative hunting strategy. The dual punch allows them to feed on nearly anything that crosses their paths. Because you're suddenly an expert on this. Or is this the lady talking? We're not establishing this very well." Frowning, Sharon handed the binoculars back to Paul. "I don't like the sound of that." Sharon's nervous, nailing routine was no act. Ever since I'd known her, she'd been afraid of one thing or another. She'd refused to fly and even avoid elevators if she could help it. Really? I mean, I'm not saying there aren't people like that, but even my mother, stuff scared her, but she'd every now and then actually go outside and do something. Although 2 years older than her husband, she seemed almost childlike at times, an impression that her high-pitched, sing-song voice only reinforced. High-pitched sing-song, that's not very flattering. She was thin and plain, but thanks to good makeup and expensive clothing, managed to look quite... Wow! You're an asshole, sir. Or in your case, ma'am. You are an asshole. This sounds like the bad fanfiction I read, where all the girls are plain and ugly, but all the guys, no matter what, are kind of hot. It doesn't matter how old you get or how fat you get. If you're a dude, you're hot. If you're not a dude, then you suck. Managed to look quite beautiful. Beautiful enough to keep people from claiming she snagged the likes of Paul Crenshaw because of her father's money. Paul put his arm around his wife's shoulder. Don't worry, sweetheart. From what I've read, there has never been an authenticated report of killer whales eating humans. Killing them, yes. Eating them, I don't think I'm aware of this. Besides, I said, if they should begin to exhibit defensive or aggressive behavior, we're out of here. The possibility of a confrontation with the killer whales, sparked a lively discussion, and for the first time since they'd come aboard, the group was actually interacting with Jason. He proved to have a wealth of information about whales, they're not whales, and their habitats. Habits, not habitats. What am I smoking? Everything from females' estimated lifespan of 50 to 60 years to 62 separate sonar clicking sounds they produced underwater. They're amazing creatures, he said, but 30 years ago, sportsmen in Canada complained so loudly about local orcas eating salmon and threatening the safety of boaters that a machine gun was installed overlooking the Strait of Georgia to kill or drive away the whales. Sharon shook her head. How barbaric. Because we are so haughty. We're so above that, I'm sure. I mean, this is only 2013. This book was written in 2000. Oh, we know so much more now. Yeah, well, fortunately the gun was never fired. Any animal that can swim 100 miles in a day is quite capable of making sudden appearances or disappearances. And so, as quickly as they'd come, the killers were gone, killer whales. But the welcome change in the group's mood lingered long after the whale's departure. By the time we'd anchored our destination for the night, I was beginning to think that my charter business might succeed after all. Unfortunately, that was just wishful thinking, because as we would soon find out, the whales weren't the only killers around. Her, 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 her. I'm so clever. Seriously, I hate puns, especially dumb things like this. So far, we've covered enough story to be several chapters in one through passive storytelling, and the only time we get any real interaction is because we want to make a really bad pun and parallel from killer orcas, which for some reason we're just calling killers, to the fact that somebody or some bodies are about to kill some people. I'm really not recommending this book. Like, the other chapters better pick up, because there really is no interaction whatsoever. This is just passive storytelling. And I don't know how many pages this book filled with just passive storytelling. Yeah, so this is 269 pages. About 30 chapters. And I bet the whole thing is passive storytelling. So, if you're not really interested in this so far, it probably won't be much more interesting for 2 more chapters. So far I say pass. This is really not cutting it for me. A watery highway system of broad straits and fjord-like channels links the approximately 200 islands known collectively as San Juans. I'm not sure if I need to say the S or not. I've just been trying to say the S. But I use the term island loosely. For starters, just when is a rock big enough to be called an island? How many rocks make a reef? Is a reef an island? What about tidal changes that cause rocks and reefs to appear and disappear and split apart or join together? How would you answer those questions? How you answer those questions can inflate the number of islands as to high as 700, although the actual figures may be disputed, as there is no doubt that the 4 larger islands, Lopez, Shaw, Orcas, and San Juan, the San Juan Island is the largest, both in terms of territory and population. Wait, hold on. I think we didn't finish a sentence there. That of the 4 larger islands, San Juan. Okay, I was wrong. But we're back to passive storytelling, probably about stuff that does not matter. Again, what purpose does knowing any of this have to the story? It's like the whole orca thing. It's a nice scene, but with the exception of a very stretched pun, of a metaphor you want to use there, that has no purpose being there. It doesn't add to the scene. What would have added more to the scene is, instead of that, is to show why, show some actual tension between the characters and this other character. Not just make some vague metaphor. But whatever. The island's early settlers were wait, I skipped a line. It's also the site of the county seat and the only incorporated town in the archipelago. The island's early settlers were no fools. They recognized prime real estate when they saw it. Gentle rolling farmlands for raising crops and cattle, thick forests for building cabins and fences, and fine harbors for providing sheltered access to the shores. Today's settlers were no less astute. Our primary retirees, artists, authors, and dropouts from the rat race. Folks who believe in the crazy notion that air without smog, beaches without litter, highways without traffic jams, and starry nights without obliterating city lights is a good thing. Good anchoring spots are plentiful around San Juan Island, but my clients wanted to spend the night at Roche Harbor Marina, where they could take advantage of the tennis courts, pool, and other trappings of a modern resort. Our first stop, though, was the on-site customs office. Since we'd been to Canada and were re-entering the United States, we were obliged to check in with customs before going ashore. When the marina had expanded its facilities a while back, they moved the customs office to the main pier just inside the harbor proper. The white clapboard building was brand new, but surprisingly low-key for a government facility. Except for the signs and flags designating a small, unassuming structure as official U.S. Customs Office, it could have passed for a one-room schoolhouse. Roche Harbor is a popular destination, and when summer is in full swing, you often have to wait in line to check in at the customs pier. But it was several days after Labor Day when we arrived, and boating traffic was light. I let Jason take the wheel while I readied the mooring lines and fenders for docking. I let somebody who's never driven a boat before take the wheel. Somebody who doesn't have the license. I let him drive. Because I didn't bother to get somebody else with ship knowledge to help me. Take the wheel while I readied the mooring lines and fenders for docking. For a novice, Jason took to sailing like a natural. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure what you just did was illegal and could have easily endangered all of your lives. He skillfully guided the sloop into the harbor and pulled alongside the pier as if he'd been doing it all of his life, which he hasn't. So he shouldn't be doing it. As usual, he made light of the accomplishment with a laid-back, no-big-deal pose. No big deal. We don't know what that looks like, so it's just a no big deal pose. When I gave him a thumbs up sign, though, he broke into a grin that stretched from ear to ear. As I stepped off the boat to turn the page to secure the mooring lines, I caught a glimpse of Martin congratulating his son with an affectionate slap on the back. It was the first warm gesture that had passed between them since the trip began. Where did he come from? Why was he there? How did you know he wasn't there, and when did he get there? It was my responsibility as skipper to clean our vessel through customs before anyone disembarked. While the others waited aboard Picture Perfect, I went inside the office. As far as offices go, it wasn't much. You already stated this. It's as big as a schoolhouse, like a one-room schoolhouse. Just a counter functioned primarily as a dividing line between the public and the inspector's gray government-issued desk. The desk was uncluttered and held a computer terminal, keyboard, and a bunch of spiral-bound notebooks. Some kind of official-looking paperwork was neatly stacked to the bulletin board on the wall behind the desk. Although there were 3 windows in the small structure, they appeared to be painted shut, which probably explained why the room was so hot and stuffy. It also reeked of obsession perfume and tuna fish. Obsession perfume. Obsession. Okay, first of all, we're not good with puns. We're not good with metaphors. And I don't care who you are, nobody is going to be able to identify what specific perfume you have by scent alone. Because not everybody is going to be able to identify that brand of perfume. Because not everybody is going to be able to afford, smell, or even get access to that brand of perfume. Perfume is just perfume. Anyway. 2 customs inspectors were on duty, which struck me as sort of unusual since it was so late in boating season. May I help you? This from the source of the perfume, a petite 20-something blonde in a starched dark blue uniform. Despite her youthful appearance, she looked official in her perfectly pressed slacks and short-sleeved shirt with the U.S. Customs insignia embroidered on the pocket. But there was something about the way she smiled that seemed forced, as if she had to prove that she wasn't just playing dress-up. She stood behind the counter while her associate wolfed down a sandwich, most probably tuna. Well, you smell tuna, so no shit, sir, ma'am, it's a tuna sandwich. At the room's lone desk. I'm the skipper of Picture Perfect, a charter boat out of Seattle with 4 clients aboard. We've been to Vancouver Island and we're returning to the U.S. The guy behind the desk looked up suddenly. He was a big man around 40 or so, with a tiny bald head, turnip ears, and a generous beer belly. He wiped a blob of mayonnaise from his mouth with the back of his hand. You say you're on Picture Perfect? I nodded. That's right. He shot the blonde a look I couldn't decipher, and, after pausing long enough to snuff another bite into his mouth, waddled over to the counter. I waited while they turned their backs slightly and conferred. After a moment, the big guy returned to his desk and sat down. He glanced back at his young partner, then tossed his half-eaten sandwich aside and started pecking fiercely at the keyboard. She, meanwhile, grabbed a clipboard and walked around the counter to where I stood. "Show me your vessel," she said sternly. The customs inspection isn't all that unusual, but her attitude surprised me. Most of the time, when inspectors ask to come aboard your boat, they do so politely and with a little less edge in their voice. I wasn't sure what I'd said, but I'd evidently raised some kind of red flag with these two. Well, dude, you don't know. You said the name of your boat, and then they all got like, WTF, that seems pretty important, and you can't figure that out? What the crap? Are you dumb? Would explain why you're telling all this entire story in passive tense. Anyway, I looked at her name tag and smiled. "My name's Kaylee Montgomery, Miss Wainwright, I don't know how to say that, and I'm happy to show you the Picture Perfect." With Inspector Wainwright following on my heels, we left the office and boarded the sloop. Jason and Martin were still in the cockpit, downing a couple of cold drinks. "Don't mind us," Martin grinned as we climbed aboard. We're just having a little father-son bonding moment." He rummaged through the ice in the cooler and grabbed a second can of Bud Light for himself and a Coke for Jason. Inspector Wainwright eyed the cooler and frowned. "How much alcohol do you have on board?" Martin gave the blonde the once-over and then belched loudly. "Not nearly enough, sweetie, not nearly enough." Wainwright dismissed him with a withering look and turned to me. "Where's the rest of your group?" "I assume Paul and Sharon are in the cabin. They said they wanted to change into their tennis clothes." "Get them up here. I need to check everyone's ID." That was a new one on me. Inspectors routinely search vessels for contraband, illegal drugs, or whatever else happened to land on their hot sheets. But rarely do passengers have to show any kind of identification. "Our ID?" I asked. She extended her hand palm side up to Jason. "You first," she said, as Jason forked over his driver's license. I opened the hatch and called to Paul and Sharon. "Is this really necessary?" Martin asked, frowning. Inspector Wainwright jotted something on the form attached to the clipboard, and then handed Jason's ID back to him. "Now yours," she said to Martin. "You're not even going to tell them why when he asked?" "I don't think you're allowed to do that. You have to tell them what you're doing and why you're doing it. You can't just keep your mouth shut about it. That's what they get your ass for in court if you're law enforcement." He paused as if considering her request, but instead of reaching for his wallet, he raised the beer can in salute before tilting back and squeaking noisily. Then Paul and Sharon joined us in the cockpit. Paul asked, "What's this all about?" "Customs inspection," Wainwright answered. "I'll need to see your ID, sir. Yours too, ma'am." Her tone was something akin to a burly motorcycle cop who just caught us careening through a school zone at 100 miles an hour. Sharon's brown eyes darted from Wainwright to her husband and back again. "Oh my." You just state that? Not even a slight exclamation? It's just, "Oh my." Her hands fluttered at her side like a bird with a broken wing. When she spoke again, her little girl voice was strained and breathy. My license is in my purse, and Oh, what about my passport? Should I get that for you too?" Wainwright nodded curtly, and Sharon scurried back inside the cabin. Paul reached for his wallet just as the inspector came barreling out the office door. "Freeze!" he shouted. "Oh, other inspector. What?" Of course, we didn't do any such thing. We all whipped around and stared open-mouthed as Wainwright's beefy partner planted himself in a shooting stance. The cannon-sized gun he aimed at us struck me was a rather extreme attention-getting device, but it worked. He got our undivided attention. I didn't know what kind of shot the guy was, but I wasn't about to argue. Well, I wasn't either. He's got a gun in my face. "As far as I'm concerned, whoever holds the gun makes the rules." "No shit, you idiot." "All of you," he boomed, "put your hands on top of your head. How drunk is this guy? This guy must be pretty drunk. "Including Inspector Wainwright," Martin quipped, seemingly amused by the absurdity of the situation. Wainwright whirled to face him. "Asshole, you heard the man." "Dude, you are an officer. You are so gonna get fired for that. You are getting fired for that. And this good dude has clearly been drinking. You are so getting fired." This would not happen. This would not happen. This would not happen. These people, they would not have jobs. They would not. They just would not have jobs. "Asshole, you heard the man. Get your hands on top of your head, now." You, like I said, you would so get fired for that. Martin rolled his eyes, but he held his tongue and complied with the order. By this time Sharon had located her purse and popped out of the hallway. She opened her mouth to speak, but the bizarre scene shocked her into silence. For half a second. Wait. That's a fragment. Shocked her into the silence. Period. For half a second. Period. Then she let loose with everything she had. On a scale of 1 to 10, Martin said, I'd have to give that scream a 10. And then we got a space to show time passed. I knew that Paul Kershaw was no criminal. When Inspector Wainwright handcuffed him, I was certain that she had made some kind of terrible snake. What are you doing? I asked incredulously. Paul hasn't done anything. Why would you say that as a statement? I would be kind of hysterical. In fact, if she's arresting him, she has to tell him why he's being arrested. Because, again, if you don't announce you're arresting somebody and tell them why they're being arrested, you have no right to arrest them. They will get your ass for that. Ask anybody ask a lawyer, ask police officers, ask anybody involved with being able to arrest somebody. That's where you're wrong, she said brusquely. She signaled to her partner, who then marched him back to their small office at gunpoint. The rest of you are free to go now, but if I had my way, you'd all be detained as accessories. Okay, first of all, that's bullshit. That's complete bullshit. She doesn't have a right to say that because, again, her life would be ruined at this point. This officer would have her life is now ruined because she's a dumbass. She's also an asshole that has no right to have this position of authority. So, yeah. Martin snorted. Accessories to what? A kangaroo court? Paul hasn't done a damn thing, and you know it. There's a warrant out for his arrest, Wainwright said with a triumphant smile. Because she's an asshole. Of course she is. Because we couldn't have officers that weren't assholes, that were actually polite and be like, sorry, but there's a warrant for his arrest because apparently he killed somebody and is wanted on suspicion of murder. So I have to take him in. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to take this guy in, and you're going to have to come with me because there are going to be a lot of questions people want to ask you. That's how it's supposed to happen. But is it happening like it's supposed to be? No, because this person clearly doesn't know how real police officers act. Not to say there aren't assholes out there, but still. We were notified to be on the lookout for your vessel. Ralph verified it on the computer while I checked your IDs. The authorities will be here soon to pick up Crenshaw. I wrapped my arm around Sharon's shoulder, and she clung to me as if I were a life ring. A life ring? You don't know what a lifesaver is, so it's a life ring. The way she was trembling convinced me that I was all that kept her from slipping to the floor. I asked the question that I was sure she'd ask if she could. What are you talking about? What authorities? What warrant? Murder. Paul Crenshaw is wanted for murder by the Port of Seattle Police. By the Port of Seattle Police. By the port? What does that mean? Why not just say the Seattle Police? And you don't say murder, you say suspicion of murder, because he's not guilty yet. You don't treat anybody as if they're guilty, even if it's clear that they are guilty, because you don't know that. That's not how American courts work. I'm still not recommending this book. Chapter 3. This is bullshit! I have to agree. Martin Porowski slammed his fist to the Martin Porowski slammed his fist on the office counter and glared indignantly at the customs inspector. The amused indifference that he'd shown initially aboard Picture Perfect had given way to raw anger. Martin had been the first to scramble off the boat when Inspector Ralph Frieden led Paul away, and we'd all quickly followed suit. Frieden? I guess that's that other guy, and we're just now mentioning what his name is, because he's suddenly important now, even though we're not really going to say that that was the other inspector's name. We congregated in the hot and stuffy customs office to demand some sort of explanation for the inconceivable predicament in which we found ourselves. An explanation that was not forthcoming. Martin's outburst simply reflected what we were all thinking and feeling. Guys, granted, you wouldn't be privy to all the information, but this is, to the best of my understanding, what the police are required to tell you. You are under arrest for this. You are under arrest for suspicion of this, whatever crime it is. And then they read you your Miranda rights. And then for your family, that's the same thing. They tell them. They can't go over everything with them, but they do go over some things with them. That would be okay. But you're not going to be told everything because stuff is still under investigation that has to go through lawyers and the courts and stuff. You can't yell and scream at police officers. They can only tell you what has been released to the public. And that's it. These guys are not accessories. They cannot be accessories to murder. That's not how accessory works. If you're an accessory to the murder, you either helped the murderer somehow, or you were aware of information, but didn't come forward with it. That's how you are an accessory to murder. Inspector Frieden cast his heavy-lidded eyes onto Martin. "I think not, sir," he said. "Your friend here is in deep doo-doo. And you'll find yourself in the same barnyard slop if you don't keep your opinions to yourself." These guys would be fired and severely penalized and punished. They would be suspended without pay because they are assholes. Martin leaned across the counter as to grab the inspector by the shirt. "You fat fuck, I oughta." "Marty, that's enough." Paul sat in the metal chair next to the inspector's desk, his hand still cuffed. "There's no need to get so excited over this. Obviously, there's been some kind of mistake. As soon as the sheriff arrives, we'll get it all straight out." "Paul's right," I said. "You know how computers are. Press the wrong key and they hiccup and spit out garbage. I could have just as easily issued an arrest warrant for the Pope." "Which would have made more sense than arresting Paul," Martin said, with a sneer directed at Frieden. The inspector put one hand on his holstered weapon and eyed Martin cautiously. "What an asshole! You are not being These guys would not be officers. I don't know how to iterate this. They would not be officers. These guys, their asses are toast. They're not officers. They're not custom officers anymore at all. They'll never have law enforcement jobs again, let alone have any job, if this is how they act. The inspector put his hand on his holstered weapon and eyed Martin cautiously. You best step away from the counter, sir. That's not how stuff works. You're not actually being threatened. Martin didn't budge. Frieden's partner, Miss Renwright, had been following the exchange from the doorway. She approached the counter now with a tense but determined stride, itching no doubt to take Martin down. For no reason. He's just upset. You calm him down. You don't threaten to shoot somebody who doesn't have a fucking gun, you assholes! This writer has clearly never been to a police station, has never took criminal justice, knows absolutely fuck all about how police actually work. You do not shoot somebody who doesn't have a weapon. You never shoot them. Even if the suspect is fleeing, you do not fucking shoot them. You chase after them. You only shoot them if they have a weapon, and only then to disable them, not to kill. This author does not know what the fuck she's talking about. She does not fucking know. Do not pick this fucking book up. It is written by somebody with no comprehension of the criminal justice system. She does not fucking know. She doesn't even watch police dramas on TV, and she's writing a mystery novel. She doesn't fucking know. Despite her small stature, I had the feeling that she probably could and relish the opportunity. But she couldn't get a chance. Paul diffused the situation by telling Martin to back off. Whatever you say, pal. Again, you should have actually had Paul say this, not just tell us Paul said this. She shrugged, moving to the spot vacated by Wainwright. He slouched against the door and said, "But this damn nonsense better get cleared up when the sheriff arrives, or we're talking a major lawsuit here." Thank you, my friend. Somebody has a bit of common sense. He took a pack of Marlboros from his shirt pocket and shook a cigarette loose. He had been carrying the pack around with him during our entire trip, but this was the first time I'd seen him open it. "You can't smoke in here, sir," blistered Inspector Wainwright. Martin snorted. "Don't tell me that's against the law, too." "As a matter of fact, this is a government building, and give me a friggin' break." He paused long enough to light up and then bolted from the office. Jason hesitated a moment and then trudged after his father. Again, we're saying a sentence meant to be frustrated to the point of sort of hysterical. This should be an exclamation point after "give me a friggin' break," not a sentence, not a statement. It should actually be an exclamation point. Sharon gripped my hand. "Oh dear," she cried. Paul gave his wife a reassuring smile. "Mario'll be okay." "But Paul," Sharon said. "Maybe I should call Daddy. We might need a lawyer." Paul shook his head. "I don't need a lawyer, honey. I haven't done anything wrong. This thing is just going to come down to a lawsuit. Isn't going to come down to a lawsuit either. Everything's going to be just fine." He nodded towards the door. "Kelly, why don't you take Sharon and the others up to the restaurant for something to eat? They said it would be a while before the county sheriff makes it over from Friday Harbor." "I want to stay here with you," Sharon protested. Paul smiled again and said, "No, you go on. I'll be all right." Sharon wouldn't drop it. "What if the sheriff comes while we're gone?" For whatever reason, I could see that Paul wanted some time to himself. I figured that Sharon could benefit from a timeout as well. "It's okay, Sharon," I said. "The restaurant has a balcony overlooking the parking area. We can keep an eye out for the sheriff while we eat." "Or you could, just step outside for a little bit and come back in, because there's nothing that's stopping you from being with your husband. And if you both need a kind of a timeout, you would just be in another room for a little bit. That's fine enough. And, in fact, call your daddy. Go get a lawyer, because these guys are assholes, and again, their asses are fired, their careers are ruined, they're not going to have a life after this, because they are fuck-ups, and know absolutely nothing about how to conduct themselves as part of law enforcement. I'm not hungry, she said in a last-ditch effort to stand by her husband. Martin walked back into the room and said, Good God, Sharon, that's not the point. Taking her by the arm, he steered her toward the door. Nobody's hungry, but we're going to do what Paul says. Because it doesn't matter what anybody else wants. All of you are assholes and dumb fucks. There's something about the ritual of eating, even the pretense of eating, that is oddly comforting. Hungry or not, we ordered comfort food and plenty of it. As I suggested, we sat outside the restaurant balcony, where we had a nice view of the marina and the hotel's flower garden. The restaurant was located in an elegant old building that was once home to John McMillan, a young Indiana lawyer who, in the 1850s, built the largest lime-producing company west of the Mississippi. While we ate, I tried to distract everyone by making small talk about the resort. I launched into the history lesson of sorts, relating how John McMillan had ruled the company and its town for 50 years and became one of the richest and most influential men in the state. Jason was the only one who seemed remotely interested. How the place wind up as a resort, he asked. After his death, McMillan's son operated the family's business until the lime deposits began to play out. In 1956, the company town was sold, and the lime kilns that had produced the valuable ingredients for making cement were shut down shortly thereafter. Subsequent owners restored the deteriorated warehouses, hotel, and other buildings and turned the McMillans' former property into the first-class resort you see today. Jason and I carried the conversation ball until it became obvious that we weren't distracting anyone from thinking about Paul and what might lie ahead. Our half-hearted exercise lapsed into an uneasy silence when our waitress, a pert redhead with a dimpled grin, returned to check on us. Glancing at her plate, she asked, Is everything all right? You've hardly touched a thing. It's none of her business. She's a waitress. She wouldn't ask that. Possessing what my grandfather used to call a good set of bow thrusters, she saddled up to Martin and added with a flirty wink, Is there something else you'd like instead? Jason sneaked a quick look at her ample bosom and blushed furiously. Granted, we weren't actually told how old Jason is, but I'm pretty sure he's past the point of with a driver's license, he's past the point of blushing when he stares at a woman's chest. You know, he's not like 12 or 13. He can look at a woman's chest and be like, Nope, but thanks for the view. Anyway, blushed furiously when his father said, Getting a little hot out here. Maybe you better bring us another round of drinks. The waitress laughed and sashayed off to the bar. I should have called Daddy, Sharon said, pushing her plate to the edge of the table. Still call him! There's nothing wrong with calling him now! Martin groaned and lit his third cigarette of the day. Exhaling, he said, Why don't you forget Daddy-o for once, Sharon? Paul's a big boy now. He can take care of himself. Fuck you! Get a fucking lawyer and get your damn dad. If y'all got money, get the fucking lawyer now. You don't fucking wait. You get one now. She didn't seem to register the comment or the harshness in his voice. I wish I had my cell phone with me. I could probably still reach him at the office. I'm not swearing because I find that offensive, Martin said under his breath. He turned toward the bar. I think I'll go see what's keeping the gal. You just set her off! You just set her off, you asshole! You motherfucker asshole! Then Jason excused himself, saying he'd meet us back at the customs office. Left to ourselves, Sharon and I fell to talking about Paul. Or, should I say, Sharon talking about Paul. I listened. It's our anniversary next week, you know, she sighed. 17 years. I remembered some congratulatory words, realizing somewhat sheepishly that I'd forgotten all about their anniversary. You said you drifted apart from these people, so how could you remember that? And it's not your place to remember their anniversary. That's their own private thing. Unless you're, like, sleeping with both of them, and, like, somehow you're his second wife, and her second spouse, or however that would work. Something I never would have done if we'd still been neighbors. Bullshit! When Wendell was alive, we always celebrated the occasion with Paul and Sharon. That I'd forgotten the date tugged at my heart because it meant that I'd also forgotten my own anniversary, since Wendell and I were married on the same date as the Crenshaws. In our case, it would have been 20 years. Well, that's nice, and I understand your loss, especially at the moment. But my God, your husband is dead. You've moved on. It's going to slip your mind because he is dead. He would not have wanted you to hang on every moment that you've spent with him, because that means you didn't move on. Do not feel bad for that. In fact, this is silly that you are mentioning it now and feeling bad for it. I was thankful Sharon was too caught up in her own problems to remember the date's significance to me. She probably doesn't, because you said you've been estranged from them for years. What would she give a flying fuck if your anniversary is on the same day as her anniversary? You are not her husband. It does not fucking matter to her when your anniversary is. You are not friends anymore. I didn't think I could handle any expression of sympathy, no matter how well intended. Your husband has been dead for a while. At some point, any expression of sympathy is not needed. Maybe I'm just a heartless bastard, but at some point, telling me you feel sorry for me is not comforting. It never is comforting, and it never will be comforting. For as much as I'd like to think I've succeeded in dealing with Wendell's death, the pain never goes away. I've stuffed it deep down inside somewhere, but it always manages to sneak up on me at the oddest moments. Maybe because you loved him, so you miss him, and sometimes missing him, actually, you notice it more. It doesn't go when people die, and you feel loss over them. It just gets easier not to think about it or dwell on it. It's hard to explain. But just because you don't cry every moment of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year, does not mean you don't care about somebody. Everybody deals with grief in their own way. Some people are not going to be super upset until 6 months from now. Some people aren't going to be upset at all. It just depends on the person and how they handle grief. All of this is pointless fucking around. We're just killing time until the writer wants to get back to the more serious part of the story ahead. If we really wanted to focus on this, it should have been one of the first things we focused on in the first chapter, not the third chapter. Essentially what we're doing is we're taking somebody else's pain and suffering, somebody else's happiness, and turning it into all about us. That's what we have a problem with in My Inner Life. It's the same thing here. I drank the last of my iced tea and changed the subject. I drank the last of my iced tea and changed the subject. How's my goddaughter doing these days? Sharon shook her head. Let's not go there, okay? 14-year-old Tiffany was the light of her life. I was puzzled by her reluctance to talk about her daughter, but didn't pursue it, knowing how difficult raising a teenager could be. My own daughter and I had plenty of problems over the years. If Sharon and Tiffany were at odds with one another, I wasn't in the mood to go there either. As I struggled to think of a safe topic, a brown and white sedan pulled into the parking area alongside the flower garden. The emblem on the doors read, San Juan County Sheriff. I scooped up the check for our mail and stood. Sharon, we better get going. The man of the hour has just arrived. Because I couldn't have offered advice having raised a kid who's clearly older than your kid. Really? Another blank space. Sheriff Dale Salon. What is with the names that this person gives her characters? Sheriff Dale Salon was about 50 with a marathon runner's build and a narrow, unlined face that suggested more than a passing acquaintance with the wonders of plastic surgery. Police officers don't make that much money to go get plastic surgery. And what would a police officer of all people care about looking good? They are police officers. They have to be healthy and fit, not good looking. His dark, neatly trimmed beard contrasted sharply with the pale complexion and the wispy blonde hair that sprouted from his head like annoying weeds. Why are we making police officers look like the bad guys? Do you have a thing against police officers? Did one give you a ticket and you took out all your frustration on them in this book? I don't understand what's with your hate of police officers. Is that why you never actually went and studied how law enforcement actually works despite reading and writing mystery novels? Makes sense. Hair sprouted from his head like annoying weeds. Judging from the black roots, he was overdue for another Grecian formula treatment. When he opened his mouth to speak, his straight white teeth were an orthodontist's delight. Since he was still wearing a retainer, it was a safe bet that he was still paying the bill too. Again, why would he? There is no reason a police officer goes and gets plastic surgery. What were you smoking when you came up with this story? How did you think this was realistic and made fucking sense? What in the fuck is wrong with you? And I can't believe Mom had another book by you. What the crap? Make it through chapter 3. Make it through chapter 3. I figured the sheriff for a man on the make What is that supposed to mean? Based on the telltale white band on his ring finger and the not-so-subtle upgrades to his appearance. But he was all business with the additional when he addressed us. This is the drill. I'll be escorting Mr. Crenshaw to Friday Harbor, where he'll be held until the homicide detectives from Seattle can pick him up. But, Sheriff, Martin protested, there must be some mistake. Paul hasn't committed any crime. I didn't know if it was because of the drinks he'd had earlier, but Martin seemed much calmer now, unlike the way he acted with the custom inspectors. He treated the sheriff with respect, and so far had refrained from making any wisecracks or disparaging remarks. Sheriff Salone clutched a piece of paper in his hand and said, "Not according to this arrest warrant." Paul shifted in his chair and asked, "What does the warrant say, Sheriff?" "We don't know any of the details." The sheriff eyed him carefully. "I guess you're entitled." "No shit, Sherlock. You can't fucking arrest somebody unless you fucking tell them why they're being arrested! Dumbasses! He scanned the document briefly and said, "And plus, why are you just telling anybody this? Only his wife and his kid." Well, actually, is that his kid? I'm not sure. Anyway, only his family should be told this crap. Privacy issue and shit. He scanned the document briefly and said, "The Port of Seattle Police Why is it a port? What port? There's just Seattle PD. Allege, thank you, that you killed a 22-year-old woman by the name of Joel Jessup. She was found aboard your yacht on Larstad's Marina." Are you actually in the building, or are you talking to him outside? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Shocked silence all around, then Sharon gasped, "No! That's impossible!" I don't know why no would have an explanation point, but not "that's impossible," because I'd be pretty shocked and would say all of this very shockedly. When the rest of us found our voices, it was to echo Sharon's sentiments, but Paul actually seemed relieved. "Sheriff," he said, straightening his shoulders, "I'm positive now that there's been a computer glitch or something. You see, I don't know any woman named Joelle Jessup, nor do I own a yacht at Lardsdale's Marina or anywhere else. My friends here can tell you that." "That's right," I said, nodding vigorously. "Well, that doesn't matter, because they still gotta check all this out. I mean, right now it's just hearsay. They can't let you go. I mean, yeah, that sucks, but they just can't let you go." For a moment I felt relieved, too. The facts were so obviously wrong that I was sure that they'd gotten Paul mixed up with someone else. "And you are?" asked the sheriff. "Kelly Montgomery. I'm the skipper of the charter boat Picture Perfect, and I work at Larstad Marina. I've known Paul Crenshaw for many years. You can believe him when he says he doesn't own a yacht or know this woman." I thought I sounded sincere and convincing, but Sheriff Salone wasn't buying it. Nor did he seem interested in anything Martin or Sharon had to say concerning Paul's innocence. "Of course not. You can't just hearsay somebody, "Oh, this guy's an upstanding citizen. He never kill somebody," because that's bullshit. Upstanding citizens do kill people. He can't just let the dude go. I've explained this before. I'm not explaining it again. This is fucking bullshit. Didn't seem interested in asserting Paul's innocence. He cut them off with an upraised hand. "That's quite enough. Save your comments for the homicide detectives. Right now, I've got a prisoner to transport to the county jail." Thank you! The only fucking person in this book who knows what the fuck they're talking about. This book sucks. don't pick it up. Don't pick up any book by somebody who clearly does not fucking know how the criminal justice system works. If you're going to write a fucking mystery novel, you better fucking know what you're writing about. That is something you will learn in every creative writing class, no matter what genre you're going to work in. You write what you know, and if you don't know, you either find out or you don't fucking write about it. Sins of Deception by Valerie Wilcox. She is full of bullshit. Do not ever pick up her shit. She doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. I'm Caleb, and I'm gonna read some Savannah Ride because I'm pissed off and I want to feel better. Bye, everybody.